Chapter 7. Feeling comfortable, feeling positive. If there's a bomb in the park where you're relaxing and someone put a sign around it declaring it safe, or tried to convince you it wasn't going to go off, you likely wouldn't feel any better. The only way you would feel safe is if a bomb squad proved it was defused, or you get the heck out of there. Think back to the last time you were hanging out with someone who just seemed a little off to you. Maybe they were nervous and talking a little too fast. Maybe they didn't smile all that often, or maybe they seemed a bit too tense, like they were overthinking something negative. Perhaps their actions made you feel a bit uneasy. Chances are that when you were around that person, you didn't feel entirely comfortable, and chances are you noticed a change in your own reactions. You might be an overall cheerful person, but around them, you might have become nervous too. Looking back now, do you think this person was successful in their social life? The principle of this chapter is how to make other people feel comfortable and positive. The reason why you need to make people feel comfortable and positive is because those are the two basic feelings one must have in order to feel safe. Safety is the most fundamental feeling one needs to have in order to enjoy their interactions with you. Our instincts are always assessing if someone may be a potential threat to us, especially if it's our first time meeting them. Making someone feel comfortable and positive in your presence is a great way to relieve some of those instinctual fears so you can have an enjoyable experience. Think about it. Have you ever enjoyed a conversation in which you didn't feel positive? Have you ever had fun and let loose around people who didn't make you feel safe? Have you ever felt positive around someone who was obviously nervous and anxious? Of course not. But the key in making someone feel comfortable and positive around you is to make yourself feel comfortable and positive. When doing so, you naturally project those feelings outward, which invites the other person to feel comfortable and positive too. Feeling comfortable means you are comfortable enough with who you are to contribute to the interaction without negative feelings or discomfort potentially turning someone off. Feeling positive means your internal state is positive enough to make your contributions to the interaction friendly and happy. Unfortunately, many good, well-intentioned people fail at making others feel comfortable and positive because they themselves don't feel comfortable and positive. Whether it's because they're not socially skilled, they're socially anxious, or they're not in the present moment and thinking about something else, many people fail to make the people around them want to stick around. Although feeling comfortable and positive is an entire psychological process in and of itself, there are two major factors that contribute to you feeling comfortable and positive. When you're involved in a social interaction with others, social anxiety stops you from feeling comfortable, since your mind is preoccupied with negative thoughts and emotions. And not valuing yourself prevents you from feeling positive, since you're not confident enough to express your true self and be vulnerable. Solve social anxiety. Social anxiety stops many people from feeling comfortable in social situations. Social anxiety can come in the form of being too anxious to go outside, attend a social event, talk to a new person, have a conversation, stay attentive, etc. Signs that you may have social anxiety include excess self-consciousness in everyday social situations, intense worry for days, weeks, or months about an upcoming social situation, feeling that you'll act in ways that will embarrass or humiliate yourself, fear that others will notice you're nervous, and or being unwilling to engage in social situations. Social anxiety can be quite a difficult thing to overcome. Doing so requires you to learn about your current fears, identify and challenge your current thoughts, reprogram your mind, address insecurities, and take steps to expose yourself to new experiences. Overcome the fear of rejection. Fear of rejection happens when you're afraid of feeling ostracized by other people. Whether this takes the form of not talking to a new person, not saying what you want to say in a conversation, or not asking someone to meet up, fear of rejection stops you from expressing yourself authentically in social interactions. There are many factors that can cause someone to reject you. Even if you're the coolest person in the world, you will still experience rejection. It may happen because of you, it may happen because of the other person, or it may happen because of something you have no control over. Trying to understand why you got rejected only works up to a certain extent, and most of the time you probably won't find out. To try and blame all rejections on other people is foolish. Things that may cause people to reject you that are within your control include your appearance, your social anxiety, the topics of conversation you bring up or don't bring up, your lack of social skills, and any potential negative vibe that you may bring. In short, in some cases, any rejection that centers around you can most likely be improved by making others feel safer and better. By a similar token, trying to blame all rejections on yourself is equally foolish. Blaming all rejections on yourself and assuming you're at the center of all rejections is an emotional reaction that clouds your response to something simple and logical. Interactions require two people at the very least. When someone rejects you, it's entirely possible that it has nothing to do with you. If you have decent self-awareness, you should be able to detect when something was your fault versus when it wasn't. Rejection that is not your fault usually comes down to two things: someone else's insecurity and/or a situational problem. Oftentimes, you may never find out for sure. People feeling insecure is extremely common. It is the most common cause of rejection that is not yours to blame. Sometimes you'll either say or represent something, whether directly or indirectly, that makes whomever you're speaking with feel insecure. This can cause them to shut you out socially. For example, if Maya, who is physically fit and good looking, walks into a room and Sarah, who is overweight, is not comfortable in her own skin as a result of Maya's presence, Sarah may not want to talk to Maya. Not because of anything Maya did wrong, but because she represents something that triggers Sarah's insecurity. Sometimes, something that is neither your fault nor the fault of whomever you're in the presence of stops you from having a satisfying social interaction, even if you and that person or people may connect well on a separate occasion. Examples of this can include a coworker not wanting to talk to you because their boss is nearby, someone not wanting to talk to you because they're talking to someone they're interested in or attracted to, or because they have their mind on something else, like work. Although these situations are simple and logical, we still find ourselves taking them personally. It's natural to do that, but understand that rejections happen, and they're not always your wrongdoing. Just knowing that rejections aren't always your fault may be a great relief to some and will hopefully help to reduce the fear of rejection tremendously. Self-esteem and the fear of rejection. The human brain works differently than what we're used to believing. You may believe that the human brain is rational, that its default is to lay out all the facts and information of a situation in order to come to the best possible conclusion. While that is true for a very small percentage of our total thoughts, most of our thoughts are emotional. When our brain operates on emotions, it creates an emotional conclusion, and we find the facts or information that will confirm our pre-existing verdict. This is called confirmation bias. Inner security, self-confidence, self-esteem, whatever you wish to call it, is an emotional perception of yourself. Your emotional perception of yourself might be somewhere between, I completely suck and am worthless, to, I'm the greatest person in the world. For people who are terrified of rejection, it looks something like, I'm not good enough for people, and I don't like myself. When a person rejects you, they are sending you information. The information is that they don't want to talk to you for whatever reason. Rejection either confirms or conflicts with the pre-existing emotional conclusion of yourself. If you're afraid of it, rejection confirms your pre-existing conclusion that you don't like yourself and you're not good enough. The opposite of this is when rejection conflicts with the pre-existing conclusion of yourself. Those with high, healthy self-esteem don't take rejection as poorly or personally, since they don't use rejection as validation for the fact that they dislike and don't accept themselves. Self-esteem through self-acceptance. Once you learn how to accept yourself, you will fear the potential unacceptance of others much less. But there is a catch. You have to honestly accept and appreciate who you are. This is not something you can fake, because the only person who benefits, and the only person you're accountable to, is yourself. Acceptance can feel like an abstract, new age topic when we speak about it in terms of accepting ourselves, but it becomes extremely clear and simple to understand when we look at it through the lens of accepting who you are. Think about a person you know personally with whom you respect. Why do you respect them? You likely respect them because they respect themselves and are a respectable person. They take care of themselves. They are self-assured. They are humble. They are kind. They are honest. They are vulnerable and courageous, and they do things you admire. Self-acceptance isn't much different. Instead of respecting another person, you're respecting yourself. There are two main sources of self-acceptance that you will need to address in order to learn how to respect yourself. Being comfortable with the negative aspects of yourself and appreciating the positive aspects of yourself. Self-acceptance is a byproduct of doing those two things right. The entire skills development part of this book is designed to help you recognize and create positive attributes within yourself. Here's a summary of how these skills help you accept who you are. Developing deep connections with those you care about brings meaning and fulfillment to your life. Meeting new people helps you associate yourself with people that bring you joy and fulfillment. Vulnerability helps you create opportunities that benefit your life. Health and fitness help you to be confident at the most basic biological level. Feeling comfortable and positive helps you be in a good state of mind. Developing social skills helps you feel comfortable with your ability to communicate and belong in the world. Enjoying being alone helps you enjoy peace of mind with yourself. This chapter is designed to help you address and become comfortable with the negative aspects of yourself that keep you from accepting yourself fully. Fears, irrational thoughts, insecurities, and a lack of self-respect. It's important to note that self-acceptance doesn't come when you finally, quote-unquote, arrive at a place where things are perfect. You can accept who you are now, even if you're still working on improving yourself. Self-acceptance and self-improvement are not mutually exclusive. Self-acceptance happens when you appreciate yourself and are comfortable with your perceived flaws and the prospect of being uncomfortable and failing. Like a good parent or friend who loves and accepts you unconditionally, self-acceptance is ultimately the practice of loving and accepting yourself unconditionally. Experience rejection. Regardless how much you mentally prepare and improve yourself to a place of self-acceptance, you're still going to get rejected in the real world, and this is precisely how you start to overcome it. The more and more you experience rejection and deal with it in healthy ways, the more and more you realize it's not such a big deal. For those who've experienced little rejection or have dealt with it in poor ways, the thought of rejection not being such a big deal seems almost unfathomable. But those who've experienced rejection and dealt with it well know exactly what I'm talking about. By dealing with rejection in healthy ways, we can use it to succeed in the future. After I held multiple jobs where I cold called companies all day, after I approached and asked out many women and practiced vulnerability for years, my fear of rejection dramatically diminished. This is not to say that I'm totally unafraid, but I'm able to act effectively despite the fear. There are exceptions to this rule. Moments in which you are heavily emotionally invested, or the rejection is particularly brutal, are going to hurt, no matter how mentally healthy you are. By accepting that rejection is a part of life and being willing to put yourself in situations where you may get rejected to serve a higher goal is the whole point of life. Life isn't lived cowering from rejection, but instead comes when you embrace it. There are good ways to go about experiencing rejection, and there are poor ways to go about it. A good way is what we've outlined in this chapter. Understand the nuances of rejection and be aware and honest about it while developing high self-esteem through self-acceptance. Poor ways of experiencing rejection can include exclusively blaming one source for your rejections, whether that be yourself, others, or your circumstances, or flooding yourself with too much rejection without experiencing enough success. We've outlined the logical reasons why rejection is sometimes your responsibility, sometimes the other person's fault, and sometimes the blame of neither, assuming that you're able to look at the rejection objectively. Unfortunately, because rejection is such an emotional process, looking at rejection emotionally is far too common. When you exclusively blame one source, there's often an underlying reason why. This can lead to anger, frustration, sadness, and hopelessness if left unaddressed. Flooding yourself with too much rejection without experiencing enough success is another poor way of handling rejection. This typically happens when you or someone else tells you that the best way to overcome your fear of rejection is to get rejected as much as you can so you realize it's not a big deal. While this is theoretically true to an extent, in practice it is a disaster. There's nothing noble about getting rejected. No success or wisdom comes as a result of getting rejected if you don't also see success in the process. It can lead to bitterness and a lack of motivation. Each rejection should serve as a learning opportunity to get you closer to success. Rejection in and of itself isn't anything you need to quote-unquote get used to. Identify and challenge beliefs. Throughout your everyday life, you'll constantly be exposed to all types of thoughts, positive and negative. The problem is, if you're insecure, sad, and lonely, these negative thoughts are going to be quite common. The good news is you can learn to manage them. Learning to manage your thoughts will help you keep a clearer state of mind, but actual improvement in your life is also required to bring you there. If your brain is in a constant state of sadness, insecurity, and loneliness, it has very good reasons to flood you with negative thoughts. The key is to work on both the internal and external aspects of your improvement as they will complement each other nicely. Mindfulness. Mindfulness means to focus on being aware in the present moment while calmly accepting your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations. Mindfulness helps you keep a calm state of mind as you're not occupying your mind with anything other than the present moment. The key concept in mindfulness is accepting your thoughts and feelings without judgment. You accept your thoughts and feelings for what they are. Thoughts and feelings. You don't judge them or yourself for having them, and you don't unintentionally engage in them. This is a powerful tool because the sooner you realize that your thoughts and feelings are not you, you stop getting controlled by them as easily. If Jessica is sitting in her room after work watching Grey's Anatomy and a thought pops up in her mind that tells her she's annoying and no one likes her, if she isn't being mindful and doesn't understand that her thoughts and feelings are not who she is, she may subconsciously engage in a thought and start going down a negative rabbit hole, which can throw off her mood for the rest of the night. However, if she is being mindful, she can accept her thoughts for what they are, just thoughts and not reality, without judging herself or the thoughts. Mindfulness is a constant practice. The better you get, the less conscious effort you'll have to put into it, just like any habit. Many people have experienced tremendous mindfulness benefits through meditation. Mindful meditation is a conscious practice of staying present, although you don't have to meditate to be mindful. While mindfulness is a fantastic practice that will help you disengage from many of the negative thoughts you feel throughout your day, there are still going to be certain thoughts that dominate your thinking, and being mindful may not help to effectively deal with them unless you pair it with a constant practice and the following healthy habits. Challenging the validity. Many of the negative thoughts that can come to dominate your mental bandwidth aren't even valid. Chances are, you have multiple thoughts that dominate your mind, but have you ever taken the time to think through whether or not they are valid, or did you assume that if it pops up in your mind, it's legitimate? The goal of challenging validity is to create a reason based on logic so you can appropriately deal with your thoughts. If you realize the logic doesn't make sense, then you can work to be mindful of it since you've discovered the holes in your argument. If the logic does make sense, then you work to address the thought in the most appropriate way. Since most negative thoughts come in the form of a problem, let's challenge the validity of these thoughts by asking the following questions. What do you think is the problem? Why is it a problem for you? Keep asking yourself why here. You may realize you don't actually have a good reason. Problem solved. Sometimes the conscious awareness of the reasoning is enough to eliminate the problem. What do you think is causing the problem? How does it make you feel? Is there external evidence that this is a problem? What would be the worst thing that could happen? What is likely to happen? What can you do to solve the problem? A few examples. Valid problem. Melissa is too nervous to go out because she's shy. What do you think is the problem? She's too shy to go out and meet new people. Why is this a problem? Because she feels people won't like her. What do you think is causing this problem? Inability to hold fun and interesting conversations. How does this make you feel? Sad and alone, since she doesn't have any friends and can't seem to make any. Is there any external evidence that this is a problem? She can think about instances where conversations stalled out or just ended in an awkward silence. Maybe she realizes it's a feeling she has instead of an actual problem. It's self-perception more than a reality-based issue. Maybe she realizes her problem isn't about her conversation skills, but instead about making people feel comfortable in conversation. What would be the worst thing that could happen if Melissa goes out to meet new people? This depends on Melissa's creativity, or paranoia, but the worst thing that could probably happen is that she gets rejected by someone when she tries to talk to them, and everybody laughs at her as she runs out of the room in tears. The point of this exercise is to put into words the worst thing that can happen so you get a real, clear image instead of some vague sense of fear. Of course, this would be terrible if it were to happen, which is the point, but the odds of this happening are extremely small, unless Melissa walks into a room of insecure, raging jerks. What is likely to happen? She goes out and either stands around awkwardly or starts talking to a new person, either in awkward or fun conversation. What can she do to solve this problem? She can learn conversation skills. She can focus on becoming comfortable in social situations. Invalid problem. Derek thinks everyone will hate him if he goes out and meets people. What do you think is the problem? Derek thinks that if he is unlikable, and everyone will hate him if he tries to meet new people. Why is this a problem? Because if he goes out and gets rejected, he will feel sad and dislike himself. What do you think is causing this problem? His own low self-image. Is there any external evidence of this being a problem? No, actually. A lot of people think he's a pretty cool man. He has friends already. Sometimes you may think something is a problem until you go through the steps and try to find evidence for it. Challenging your own negative thoughts is likely to clarify flaws in certain thoughts that you may have. Now that we establish what's real and legitimate, we can focus on addressing the actual insecurities. Addressing insecurities. Even if you're working on understanding rejection and accepting yourself and practicing mindfulness and challenging the validity of your irrational thoughts, you're still going to experience negative thoughts and emotions. The good news is that through this process, the causes of those thoughts and emotions are going to be real problems. The bad news is that the thoughts and emotions come from real problems. The good news is that insecurities can be addressed. The bad news is that it can be difficult, or you can only improve them to certain extents. Insecurities come in all different forms. Insecurities can be physical, such as your appearance, height, hair, acne, asymmetries, or body shape. They can be social, such as your conversational abilities, shyness, or intelligence. They can also be emotional, such as jealousy, your emotional state, need for validation, trust issues, or feelings of inadequacy. All are valid. The ultimate goal with addressing insecurities is to accept yourself. You don't need to become a perfect human and be flawless physically, socially, and emotionally. The goal is to get you to a point where you are comfortable with and appreciate yourself. By the same token, not all insecurities need to be solved. The ones you should address are the ones you identify as holding you back from accepting yourself, the ones that stop you from being comfortable with yourself in social situations. When you identify an insecurity you'd like to address, you can choose to address the cause or the emotional reaction. The strategy will depend on the specific insecurity, and while it's best to address both, in some situations you may be able to address only the emotional reaction. During my first year of undergrad, I developed terrible acne on my face and upper body, which caused me to be extremely shy and insecure. Although I spent a lot of time working on my emotional reactions to it, it was clear I needed to tackle this cause in order to feel secure. Through a year of doctor's trips and advanced meditation, I was able to solve it. For some insecurities, dealing with your emotional reaction is all you need to do, or all you can do. If you get extremely jealous when your best friend is better friends with someone else, you can try to make them better friends with you, if you think that's a good idea. However, working on your emotional reaction would be a healthier solution. Addressing the cause. The first step to addressing the cause of your insecurity is to understand your emotions. How does this insecurity make you feel? When you ask yourself this question, refuse to answer it in a fluffy or dismissive way, because if you only felt sort of kind of bad about it, it wouldn't be an insecurity in the first place. You need to develop a healthy but burning desire to overcome your insecurities if you are actually going to do so, or else you'll never have the motivation to overcome them, because insecurities can be difficult to manage. The next step is to educate yourself on the topic, how it affects you, and how you can overcome it, and how others have overcome it. There's virtually no insecurity that you can experience that many other people haven't had and overcome already. But you need to become very knowledgeable on all aspects of your insecurity if you want to have the logical understanding of how to get through it. Lucky for you, pretty much everything you need to know exists on the internet. Last but not least, you'll need to devise a legitimate course of action on how you'll solve it. The best place to start is to look at the strategies other people have employed and adopt those. Bonus tip: be accountable to yourself and other people. Of course, you need to be disciplined towards yourself, with kindness to self, in order to follow through on your course of action, because nobody else but you is going to have 24/7 access to your progress. But you should also share your plan with a trusted person. That way, you'll have a social contract, which is a powerful biological tactic to keep you honest. Addressing the emotional reaction. Insecurities cause an emotional reaction. In many cases, addressing the cause of the insecurity can help eliminate the insecurity, but in many other cases, you will have to deal with the emotional reaction. Accept the thought. The first step to addressing an emotional reaction to an insecurity is to accept it for what it is and how it makes you feel. The opposite of this is to avoid thinking about it, deny it, distract yourself, or suppress the thought. If you are willing to admit your insecurity and take an honest look at yourself, you have taken an extremely difficult but important first step, and you are to be rewarded for that. Seriously, it's not uncommon for people to go long periods of time avoiding the truth. Question why you feel this way. Now that you admit the truth about how you feel, you should question why you feel this way. Since insecurities are internal thoughts, it's worth asking, what does this insecurity say about me? If you were courageous enough to be honest about how you feel, I hope you'll be courageous enough to investigate why you feel this way and what it says about you. An emotional man could come to the conclusion that he beats himself up for not having the ability to be socially savvy. A short man could discover that he feels inferior to taller men. An overweight woman could realize that she is uncomfortable with other women getting more attention from men than her. If, at this point, they discover that their emotional reaction can be solved by addressing the cause, they should take the steps outlined previously. Practice compassion to self. Compassion to self is treating yourself how a best friend would treat you. A best friend doesn't beat you up, emotionally abuse you, and disrespect you. Instead, they support you, cheer you up, and accept you while being honest with you and keeping you accountable. From now on, your brain is your best friend. This will make being comfortable with yourself much easier, since your brain won't be actively working against your comfort and confidence. Comparison and perfectionism are two common thought patterns that work against your ability to have compassion to self. When you compare yourself to others, you prevent yourself from focusing on yourself, since your metrics are no longer internal, but instead relative to another person. The danger of comparing yourself to somebody is that you can always find a way to feel good about yourself by thinking of someone you're quote-unquote better than, and you can always find a way to feel bad about yourself by thinking about someone you're quote-unquote lesser than. Perfectionism is similar to comparison as it stops you from being compassionate towards who you are currently. Unlike comparison, when you're measuring yourself against someone, perfectionism is when you compare yourself to the image of perfection you have, and every flaw you perceive serves as a harsh critique to your lofty, unrealistic expectations. If you find yourself comparing yourself to others or being a perfectionist, it's worth going back and questioning why you feel this way. You need a clear picture of what is causing you to try and achieve standards that don't come from a good place. It's worth finding affirmations that make you feel compassion towards yourself and repeating them until a thought process becomes a mental habit. If you think affirmations are goofy and strange, that's the entire point. It's supposed to feel goofy and strange at first, since the words and your mind are not yet in line, but fully commit to it anyway. Affirmations are like a good parent teaching their young child to stop crying and stand up straight. The child might scream and cry in the moment, but it's up to the parent to make them act in a certain way. As the parent continues to instill this behavior into the child, and the child grows up and learns more about life, they start realizing that not crying and standing up straight helps them navigate the world better. Then, they start not crying and standing up straight without their parents telling them to do it, because they know this serves them better. Great self-affirmations include, even though I'm feeling blank, I love and accept myself anyway. I accept the best and worst aspects of who I am. Changing is never easy, but it's easier if I stop being hard on myself. I deserve kindness, love, and empathy from myself. I don't need to be better than blank. I need to be better than who I was yesterday. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to do my best. I will be patient and trust the process. Focus on the interaction. Social anxiety happens when you're focused on yourself. When you're focused on yourself, especially when you're focused on the negative aspects, thoughts like, does this person like me? Or, did I say something stupid? Pop into your head and can derail the opportunity to have a great interaction. Instead of worrying about yourself, develop the habit of focusing on the interaction. When you do this, you focus on fun. You're able to talk about interesting things, get to know the other person, and enjoy yourself without being distracted by the internal, self-conscious dialogue. Dealing with the physical symptoms of social anxiety. It's not uncommon to be nervous, become shaky, have difficulty talking, or start blushing when you're socially anxious. Even if you dealt with the emotional and mental aspects of social anxiety, you still may have physical symptoms when you're in social situations. When this happens, start to calm yourself down by focusing on your breathing. Slow, calm breathing will help calm your mind and body and bring it back to a more grounded state. From there, you can assess whether or not you have the ability to perform the task at hand. If the task seems manageable and doable, it's up to you to have the courage to do it. The good thing is that confidence comes from repeated successful performance, so if you are able to do whatever task is making you nervous now, even if you don't do it well, you are well on your way to developing real confidence. If the task seems overwhelming and almost difficult to you, It is worth starting out slow and taking progressive steps instead of trying to do everything all at once. If you're afraid of attending big group events, you can start out by talking to people in more comfortable situations, then moving on to one-on-one meetups, then working your way up to group events. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Respect yourself. When you respect yourself, you value yourself highly enough to start expressing yourself truthfully. This will help you to become happier with yourself. Respecting yourself is also a key part in feeling positive in social interactions, since other people tend to respect you to the extent that you respect yourself. Respect comes from appreciating the perception of high value somebody has. Everyone whom you respect comes as a result of you perceiving them to have high value, and everyone who respects you comes as a result of them perceiving you to have high value. Other people's perception of your value comes from your perception of your own value. A caveat to valuing yourself is that it has to be authentic. Pretending to value yourself by acting or overcompensating will almost always fail, because people's social instincts are very alert to even the subtlest behavioral cues. The good news is that feeling comfortable with yourself by working through social anxiety is a big part of the battle. But by properly working through social anxiety, you will eliminate many of the things that would otherwise cause you to diminish your own value. This section is dedicated to actions you can take to practice valuing yourself. Personal congruence. Personal congruence is when you're consistent with your personality through all your social situations and you talk and behave in line with your true desires and intentions. This is the definition of being yourself, and is only achievable through a commitment to your authenticity. The reason why personal congruence commands respect is because it is a signal of rock-solid internal security. People who are personally congruent see no reason to change their personality to please others and are confident enough with themselves to act in a way that reflects their true desires. Personal congruence also commands respect from others because it commands trust from others. Distrust comes when you suspect that someone isn't being entirely truthful, has ulterior motives, or when they act in different ways around different people. A personally congruent person blows any sense of distrust out of the water through pure authenticity. Personal congruence will allow you to be the best and most enjoyable version of yourself because you won't have to put on a fake persona to fit into a social situation to impress others. You won't need to seek validation from others, as you're comfortable with getting the validation that comes from people appreciating the real you. And you will act in a way that you want, which means you will be free from the sense of needing recognition. The beautiful thing about being personally congruent is that the people who gravitate towards you end up really liking you. You gain that mass liking for a very counterintuitive reason, because you are openly inviting people to dislike you. When you are completely and unapologetically yourself, you are putting your true self on display and subconsciously telling people to take it or leave it. The ones who aren't so thrilled with you slowly back off and disappear from your life. But the ones that like you voluntarily keep paying attention and voluntarily stay a part of your life, often resulting in them liking you more. As a result, the ones who end up staying are there because they like you and want to be there. It doesn't feel forced, because it's not. Deny the burning need to be validated. In order to become free to act in a way that's congruent with who you are, you will need to overcome the need for validation. This becomes possible when you deny the desire for recognition. Seeking validation will mentally trap you into living to satisfy the needs of others. If you catch yourself saying things to yourself like, I will do this if I get recognized and appreciated for it, or it's not worth doing if I don't get recognized and appreciated for it, you're treating your behavior as a means to get validation or acceptance, which means you are not being yourself. If you do anything that does allow you to be greatly recognized, such as posting on social media, giving a presentation to a crowd, or receiving an award, make sure you are doing those things for the purpose of doing them, and don't have any expectations for recognition. The last part is especially important. Practice being blunt. Bluntness is when you are clear and truthful in what you say without any filters or indirection. They should not be mistaken for being rude or malicious. Bluntness is saying what you mean. When you practice bluntness, you'll stop altering your own personality to please others. This would give you a new sense of social freedom that you probably would have been able to achieve if you constantly tried to censor your speech. It's easy to be blunt when you're telling people what they want to hear, but the real freedom comes when you start telling people what they don't want to hear, but what you consider to be objectively true. Once again, This has nothing to do with being rude or malicious. It's about not covering up your true intentions or desires with a veil of pleasant speaking. It's fine if you need to add certain phrases to make others more receptive to your message, as long as you don't cover up your true intention. If you want to express your discontent, you can say, "I didn't like this." Examples of not being blunt in the situation can include giving a fake compliment or saying something was okay when in reality you didn't like it. Just say you didn't like it. Not everything has to be great. And if this isn't good and you tell the person in a non-malicious way, they can take the feedback and improve. If you want to say no to something, you can say, "No thank you," or just, "I'm good." Examples of not being blunt in the situation include saying yes when you actually don't want to and making up an excuse. Just say no. Be considerate when you say no, but don't sacrifice your own desires to spare someone else the pain of rejection. If you want to ask for something, you can say, "Hi, can I get blank from you?" Or, "Can you do blank for me?" Examples of not being blunt in the situation include giving signals that you need help or creating covert social contracts. Just act directly. You're far more likely to get what you want. One thing that holds a lot of people back from practicing bluntness is the fear or guilt of other people's negative reactions. Simply put, you're not responsible for other people's emotions. The only exception is if your intention is to hurt someone else. But if you are blunt with no ill intention, you are not responsible for how the other person reacts. Live up to your values and don't compromise them. A sign of a strong, respectful person is that they have values and they don't compromise them. Values make up who you are. Your ability to uphold good values demonstrates integrity, clarity of purpose, and self-respect. What you do is what you are. Values are not about what you say, but instead about what you do. How you behave and what actions you take determine your values. Your words communicate your behavior. If you ever want to take a hard look at yourself, don't look at the words you say, but look at what you've consistently done, your actions. One can say they value something, but if their actions say otherwise, then they don't truly value what they say they do. However, if they change their behavior once they become aware of the more important values, then this is proof that they truly value it. It's all about behavior. The giant oil corporation who claims to, quote-unquote, be committed to the responsible treatment of our environment, but pays employees low wages to dispose of toxic waste in a lake clearly values money and taking shortcuts over their supposed value of commitment to environmental responsibility. But values can be a lot subtler and not very obvious. The workaholic who spends 80 hours a week in the office may be looked at as a person who values making a positive impact on society and providing for their family. However, if you dig deeper and realize the reason why they spend 80 hours a week in the office is so they can avoid fixing the problems with their spouse, it may become apparent that they don't value working as much as they value hiding from problems. Hold on tight. Everyone wants to make a lot of money. Everyone wants to be honest. Everyone wants to have friends. Everyone wants to be ethical. Everyone wants to be healthy. But the strength of your values lies in what you prioritize over others. In our world of abundance, the word prioritization seems to get lost. Values are about prioritization. When push comes to shove, which one do you choose over the other? You can't prioritize your health and your work. You have to prioritize your health over your work. You can't prioritize a night of Call of Duty with your friends and being social. You have to prioritize a night of Call of Duty with your friends over being social. Hopefully not in that order, but that's up to you. Prioritization may not be much of a problem in your everyday life where conflicts or tough decisions don't happen constantly, but sometimes your values get pressure tested when you're forced to make a difficult decision. This is when you double down and strengthen your grip on your values. The degree to which you sacrifice your values is the degree to which you disrespect yourself and therefore allow others to disrespect you, as you are not congruent with what you believe. Having values but giving them up when the going gets tough signifies one of two things. You either don't have the ability to uphold values that are important to you, or you are willing to compromise your values. Both will likely cause you to lose respect for yourself and others. Set and enforce strong boundaries. Boundaries are the limits we set with ourselves and with other people. It's when we draw the line between what we will do and what we won't do, what we will tolerate and what we won't tolerate. Boundaries are the gateway to becoming respectable. When you have strong and healthy values, you show people how they should act around you, and how they should handle interactions with you. Boundaries are important to a strong sense of respect because you are constantly choosing how other people treat you. Yes, you read that correctly. You are constantly choosing to let people treat you in the manner that they do. Figure out what your boundaries are. Most of your boundaries are influenced by your overarching values. If your values include traits such as respect, responsibility, integrity, and honesty, then your boundaries in most situations are going to incorporate those. With that being said, in situations where you find yourself often, such as work, with friends, dating, and so on, it is definitely worth being conscious of what your boundaries are, so when you notice they're getting pushed, you will recognize it and be able to have an appropriate response. If all else fails and you haven't had a chance to become fully consciously aware of your values, go with your gut and what feels right, as long as it's in line with your values. Figure out how to enforce your boundaries. Most situations in which you will need to enforce your boundaries will require you to use your words. However, there are situations where actions alone work, too. The important thing to do when you are enforcing your boundary is to be direct, serious, and clear. Enforcing a boundary is not a regular interaction with another person. You enforce boundaries when something is becoming a problem, so the seriousness of the situation must be taken into consideration. You also need to be direct and clear to get your point across. The last thing you want to do is be overly friendly or over-explain your situation, as these are clear signals that you are not able to control yourself when you need to be serious. Pretend like you're a good, strong police officer. If you get stopped by one of these officers, they're not going to be overly thrilled to talk to you, and they will make themselves clear. When communicating your boundary, it's optimal to do these 3 things. Explain your boundary, explain why it's important to you and why it affects you, and explain how you would like the other person to behave. Explaining your boundary is simple, but this is where you need to be clear and direct. You need to let the other person know why this is important to you and or how it affects you, as they may not be sure, even if it seems obvious from your point of view. Lastly, you must communicate how you would like the other person to behave, as this will give them clear guidelines on how to move forward. When you do let somebody know how to behave towards you, set them up for success so they're more likely to follow through with consistency. Enforcing boundaries, especially if one is inexperienced or emotional about it, can turn into a messy situation. You always want to be calm and rational when you enforce a boundary. When you do enforce a boundary, be considerate of the other person, their point of view, and their feelings too. You can't run around acting like a tyrannical dictator unless you want to lose another world war. If things get emotional, do not attack the other person's character. The only thing you want to criticize is their behavior and its effects, not who they are as a person. If you want a guaranteed way to make sure someone doesn't follow your boundary and maybe even actively goes against it, attack your character. Keep your boundaries I-centered, not you-centered. Use phrases like, I feel, I would prefer the situation to be, etc. Using the word you will run the risk of hurting the other person's pride, causing them to be emotional. Discuss any problems that the other person might have about your boundary or offer to elaborate on your boundary after they've responded. You want to make sure that all is resolved right there on the spot. If the person with whom you're speaking expresses any anger that you deem unreasonable, manage it and divert the focus back to being rational. Here are some examples of strong and healthy versus poor boundary enforcement. They insult you. Poor. Hey you idiot, don't call me a insert insult. Poor. Closes down and avoids confrontation. Strong and healthy. Brad, I don't like being called a insert insult. Please do not insult me ever again. They constantly complain around you. Poor. Shut up. Stop being such a whiner. Poor. Aw, it's okay. Yeah, this situation sucks. Or, tell me more. Strong and healthy. Look, I don't think you should be complaining about the situation this much if it's not helping. When you're ready, you might want to look into some solutions that you can take to make this better. Common boundaries that everyone should have. Saying no. Not apologizing if you've done nothing wrong. Not letting others insult you. Speaking your mind openly. Not explaining yourself all the time. Not taking responsibility for other people's actions or emotions. Calling out dishonesty or disingenuousness. Not tolerating a weak, complaining, or victim mentality. Not tolerating inconsiderate or rude behavior. Not being friends with people you don't want to be friends with. Not letting others interrupt you. Protecting your personal free time. Protecting your attention. Protecting your personal space. Protecting your money and resources. Feel your feelings freely. Respectable people know how to manage their feelings. Respectable people are often seen as being cheerful and optimistic. This is no coincidence. They're not born with a special gift that you can't have. They're like this because they know how to manage their feelings, which enable them to feel positive emotions quite often. The real test of how much you get to enjoy positive emotions is how well you can manage your negative ones. People who are unskilled at managing negative emotions typically do one of two things: express their emotions in unhealthy ways, lashing out, being narcissistic, or suppress their emotions. The problem with suppressing emotions is if you suppress one emotion, you suppress them all. Emotions are not like toppings on a pizza. You can't just throw away the ones you don't want. You have to take it all or take none of it. More accurately, the degree to which you suppress one emotion is the degree you suppress all of them. When respectable people feel sad, angry, frustrated, jealous, and so on, they don't hide to themselves that they feel this way. They feel what they feel and deal with it effectively. Respectable people manage jealousy through appreciation. Respectable people manage hate through communication, forgiveness, and perspective. Respectable people manage sadness through compassion for self and rational thought. Respectable people manage frustration through conscientiousness and direction. The people who are capable of feeling love and are able to express it freely are the ones who have a healthy relationship with all of their emotions. This leads them to a life of experiencing joy, laughter, happiness, and excitement, and all the negative emotions too. Random appreciation stories. I've learned to love freely to the people in my life without any reason or expectation at all. The reason why I express appreciation for people is because I feel like it. I have no ulterior motive, nor do I expect anything in return. This has made my life significantly better and has dramatically improved my relationships with the people in my life. The following examples aren't meant to be super amazing, life-changing stories, but instead are small yet meaningful bits of feeling my feelings freely from which you can take inspiration. The thing is, you don't need to be over the top when you experience your feelings freely. Most of the time, feeling your feelings freely is going to come from the minuscule, spontaneous moments of your life. CEO appreciation. When I was working at my first company, a new but fast-growing local startup, I got to witness firsthand what a good CEO looked like. By no means was this a Fortune 500 CEO, but it was definitely a person who was taking his company to good places. I learned a lot, not only from observing him and the company, but from studying business on my own time. I noticed he was doing a lot of things right, from how he organized his company to how he operated it. However, it wasn't until half a year or so after I left that I fully realized what he was doing and how he was doing it. I started working for another local startup where I got a different perspective and started understanding business better. At that moment, I was inspired to send my former CEO a message letting him know what I realized. I don't exactly remember what I sent specifically, but it's pretty much about how I thought he was doing a good job as CEO and how I admire his work ethic, his level of thought, and how he carried himself. I thought he needed some words of encouragement since his business was going through a rocky time, and I'm sure he didn't always get the reassurance. I had no ulterior motive for sending the note. It wasn't me, quote-unquote, building my network, or whatever self-centered professionals would say in that case. Just sincere appreciation. Pay my respects. The neighbors in the house I grew up were amazing people who made my childhood significantly more memorable. Through chatting with me, doing favors for our family, or hosting us at their house for the annual New Year's event, they were great people and very much loved by our family. The father of the family, Michael, was also an exceptionally talented handyman who saved our family from a number of expenses. He fixed our furnace, ventilation, dishwasher, and faucet without asking for anything in return. The family moved away when I was a teenager, and I've lost touch with them since, although there's no doubt we will always have a strong remembrance of one another. One day, a few posts started popping up on my Facebook feed informing that Michael passed away from leukemia. This made my heart sink. I hadn't been in touch with the family for so long, and the news seemingly came out of nowhere. After the initial shock, my mind immediately turned to his wife, Lisa. I couldn't imagine what she was going through. Lisa had been so good to us during our childhood. The least I could do was reach out and extend my condolences. We exchanged a few messages. I expressed how sorry I was for her loss, let her know how much Michael meant to us, and wished her for her strength during these tough times. After we ended our conversation, I felt like I needed to do more. Then I remembered one time when I was younger and brought Lisa back a gift from Japan. It was a small hanging scroll decoration with some Japanese art on it. I remember her cherishing the gift for a long time after, so I decided to do something similar. I hopped on the internet and looked for a similar decoration, this time relating to the loss of a loved one. I found an elegant piece with a lovely quote on it and I promptly sent it to her. A week or so later, I got a very long emotional message from Lisa telling me the gift brought tears to her eyes and expressing her deep gratitude. The quote read, "Those who love us don't leave us. They walk beside us every day." Everybody needs a therapist. I believe everyone needs a therapist. Not because everyone is mentally ill, but because everyone needs to be mentally healthy. Therapy is a catch-all term for psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, and other social workers. Each of them has their own specializations. I personally have experience with psychologists and counselors, and I can tell you that they help address many problems that revolve around insecurities, anxieties, boundaries, and more. Therapists are like doctors for the mind. In the same way you would go to the doctor if you had tightness in your chest or a broken toe, you would go to a therapist if you are feeling mentally stressed, anxious, depressed, and or dealing with a problem you don't have the specialization to fix. It doesn't necessarily have to be a severe mental problem for you to get a beneficial experience from a therapist. You don't only go to doctors when you're in serious pain or on the verge of death. You also go for checkups and minor issues. The same applies for therapists. Everyone needs to talk to a therapist, not because we all have crippling mental problems, but because we all need to be mentally healthy and address even seemingly small problems that can compound into bigger problems if left unchecked. In modern culture, going to a therapist still carries a stigma, although it's getting better. There are generally 3 reasons why someone is reluctant to go to a therapist. The first is the general reluctance to get help. These are people who prefer to tough it out or handle things on their own. Although they may justify their behavior by them being independent or strong, this is almost always a lie. It's an ego issue, and these people are unfortunately extremely lacking in self-awareness. The second issue has to do with therapists specifically. Maybe someone is willing to go to a doctor but isn't willing to go to a therapist. This likely has to do with the fact that mental health is not easily visible as opposed to a flu or a broken rib, or they have some specific issues with therapists. The third reason is they feel shame. They feel shame admitting that they have problems with their mental health and shame that they need to see someone to get those problems resolved. Feeling this way is normal. Just don't let it get in your way. It takes courage to go to a therapist, but I can guarantee that every person who's done so will tell you how great of an experience it's been, and the people who talk negatively about it are usually people who've never gone in the first place. The more you think you don't need therapy, the more you need to go. If I'm being honest with you, if you read this far, I highly recommend you visit a therapist. It may not seem obvious to you, but from someone with a non-emotional view, it makes sense. No one reads this book for fun. We've already covered the reasons why people don't typically feel comfortable and positive socially. Fear of rejection, insecurity, self-esteem, lack of respect, and so on. You clearly want to feel comfortable and positive, but you can't seem to get there yet. In order to get to an emotional place where you can actively go out and feel comfortable and positive, you need to overcome emotional issues that you may not even be aware that you have. This is exactly how a therapist can help. They can help you overcome the problems you have, and the ones you don't realize you have are the ones most likely stopping you from succeeding. The "wow, I never noticed that" moment. One summer when I was 18, I went on a weekend trip with a group of friends to a cabin we rented. I remember on 2 separate occasions on that weekend, I said 2 things that I found to be stupid. I don't remember exactly what I said, since it was insignificant in and of itself, but I remember my friends' reactions. Some of them were probably wishing I hadn't said what I said. They might have forgotten about it after a few moments, but I didn't, at least at the time. Those 2 instances killed my mood for the entire trip and left me sort of anxious and on edge. I think the reason why this happened is because I experienced such a negative reaction from the people around me. Why would you say that type of thing? I was in such a negative mental state of self-hatred after the weekend trip that I signed up for an online therapy service because I knew something was up. All I did was say something that I should have laughed off or cringingly let go. Clearly, this mental state was not beneficial. After being assigned a counselor, we did the usual things. Talked about why I was there, talked about who I was, talked about how I felt, and so on. Then we got to the good stuff. I explained to my counselor that I'd been experiencing problems with saying something that I perceived to be stupid and receiving a negative response. When this happened, I immediately closed down and started beating myself up. She agreed with me that I had a problem, so we started digging deeper. We talked about my university experience, the positive and the negative, although I definitely perceived it to be more negative. A few problems, but still not the core, we moved on. We started talking about my high school life, more positives, but then we dove into some negative experiences. I told her that I had a pretty good high school life. It wasn't exactly eventful or anything, but I had a solid group of friends and we had fun. But there was definitely a gaping hole for as long as I could remember. My love life. I'd never really been that successful with girls, pretty much my entire life. My parents weren't exactly great teachers on how to succeed with teenage girls I liked, because they grew up in a different country with completely different social norms. My siblings, by extension, were in the same boat as me. My friends were probably struggling equally. I guess it was no surprise that I didn't have a great love life, or any love life for that matter. My counselor and I started investigating this. She was pretty sure this was the root of the problem. I wasn't convinced, but hey, I'm not the one with the credentials. She asked me if I ever tried to date any girls I liked in high school. Aha, well, dang. The answer is yes, unfortunately. I was in 9th grade when I first experienced feelings for a girl. This was my first year of high school, and I was meeting people from elementary schools all over the town. The town didn't have middle schools. I had a few crushes on girls in my elementary school, but they were more childhood fantasies than anything. But in 9th grade, I met this one girl and developed feelings for her. Of course, I was 14 at the time, so I had absolutely no clue what to do. I talked to her quite a bit throughout the semester. I added her on Facebook, and we chatted in person quite a bit too. I thought things were going great. I mean, she was replying to my messages and seemed happy in person, so that must have meant I was on the right track, right? Note my extreme naivete. It didn't help that a guy I also knew was super into her too. Although I was sure I was a better option than him, my eagerness to date her became an urgent matter. I didn't want to run the risk of losing her to this guy. After a few more weeks of talking, both in person and on Facebook, I messaged her and told her that I liked her. It was nothing too serious. I dropped it casually into a conversation we were having. She continued the conversation without acknowledging what I had said. Maybe she didn't see it. Tack in 9th grade clearly couldn't take a hint. I was confused, but I carried on naively. A few weeks after that, I told her again that I liked her, but this time I was more direct, so my message couldn't be overlooked. Well, I guess my intent worked, because she gave me a straight response this time. Unfortunately for me, the straight answer was not the one I wanted to know. It went something along the lines of, "That's really sweet, but I don't feel the same way in return. I think we should stay friends." Oh. Well. Now what? If the external world came crashing down at that moment, I wouldn't have noticed because my internal world has already crashed down with her response. Of course, I felt extremely bad, but I played it cool, both to her and to myself. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. I didn't get emotional about it, and I just carried on like nothing was wrong. Despite the fact that I put my neck out and got my head chopped off and my emotional subconscious was probably running around in panic. When I told my counselor the story, sure enough, we both realized this was the issue. How did I know this was the issue? I think the fact that I was pretty much in tears telling her the story had something to do with it. That was the first time I told anyone that story. Why had I never told anyone before? It took me 6 years to admit it, 6 years of pushing away and suppressing a devastating event and not properly dealing with it. When my counselor explained why that event had affected me all those years later, my mind was blown. I told the girl I liked her. She responded negatively, and I shut down and felt awful about myself. The same thing happened with those moments on the cabin trip. I said something stupid, people responded negatively, and I shut down and felt awful about myself. My reaction, shutting down and beating myself up, was just a psychological defense mechanism to prevent me from feeling this type of negative emotion I felt when I got rejected for the first time. I was subconsciously trying to protect myself from emotional pain, although I may have been doing a bad job. This mental pattern had been building for the last 6 years because I never properly worked through those emotions. Well, I thought, better late than never. We were going to work through those emotions right now. A big part of working through your emotions is talking about them. Just the act of talking about your emotions can solve many emotional problems. Storing away and suppressing your emotions is likely causing them to come up again, just in a different context. In my case, to put the nail in the coffin and put my emotional problem to rest, my therapist had me write out a letter to my 9th grade self. We discussed the letter in our following session. Letter to younger self. Exercise for therapy. Not edited, other than for minor grammatical changes. Some names removed for privacy. Written. August 2018. Events occurred. School year of 2012-2013. Hey 9th grade TAC, this is an older you coming to talk to you about what happened with her name. First, I want to reassure you that everything is going to be okay. Take it from me, I'm the living proof. I understand it wasn't easy to make yourself vulnerable and tell her how you felt about her. And I definitely understand how you felt when you got rejected, the feeling of embarrassment that you got from her and from other people if they found out, although I don't think anyone did. The feeling of shame because you spent hours fantasizing about a relationship that seemed almost certain to be ripped out from under you, and the feeling of jealousy you felt when you found out another guy started dating her. I don't blame you for having strong emotions either. She was beautiful, had an amazing body, and was sweet. I remember when you were in elementary school and you had huge crushes on 3 girls and never had the courage to let them know how you felt. When you did muster up the courage to let a girl know how you felt and got rejected, I know the pain you experienced. It didn't help that you didn't tell another girl you had a huge crush on that same year how you felt about her. And it really didn't help that the next year, you told another girl you had a huge crush on how you felt and experienced the same thing again. Also, the prom date rejection 4 years later in senior year probably made you feel like your whole high school experience was not romantically successful. But I appreciate you had the courage to ask out another girl you had an enormous crush on in the first year of university, despite all the things you were going through. But when she didn't want a relationship, it made you feel like you were in 9th grade all over again. I'm writing to you to thank you for protecting me all these years from more failure and rejection. But now that I'm older, more mature and wiser, I'll be able to handle rejections in order to go after what I really want in my dating life. I'm sorry that all those high school rejections made you feel worthless in terms of your dating life and made you feel insecure about still being a virgin. But everything will be better. I can't promise you how because even I'm not sure, but I promise that everything will turn out better than you expected. I'm proud to say that after writing this letter and talking about it in my next section, my mind was relieved, and all of a sudden, I stopped beating myself up for the stupid things I say. I still say stupid things, don't get me wrong, but I don't beat myself up for it nearly as much as I did before dealing with my issues. I tell you this story because therapy helped me work through this problem, including other issues like this, that I most likely would have never worked through on my own. As a young, inexperienced person looking at myself through my first-person view, I never would have been able to figure out the root of my problems and make the connection. Therapy is a great place for you to express your emotions in a safe, private place with a trained professional. But sometimes the benefit comes from someone asking you the right questions for the first time. Trust me, if you're dealing with any social issues, and you most likely are, given the fact that you're reading this book, I would highly recommend talking to a therapist. You may also find yourself working through issues from roots you never thought you had. Your problems most likely differ from mine, but all problems share the same fundamental outline. We have suppressed emotions we haven't worked through, which causes problems in our present day. Whether those problems affect your perception of yourself after a negative reaction from someone like they did me, whether it's a self-perception issue, a distorted view of something, or an inability to be social, assertive, or comfortable, therapy is a great tool for moving past what's keeping you stuck. However, therapy is only a tool. You get out of it what you put into it, kind of like at the gym. You don't just buy a gym membership and show up and expect to be slim and muscular. You have to put in the consistent work through effort. It's the same with therapy, except the effort is about showing up and expressing your emotions, which means being vulnerable. This can be really hard for some people because vulnerability requires you to fight through emotional pain. But that's the whole point. It's a safe, private place with a trained person for a reason, so you can work through your issues safely and privately. Key takeaways. The principle in this chapter of improving your social life is making other people feel comfortable and positive. The reason you need to make people feel comfortable and positive is because those are the 2 basic feelings one must have in order to feel safe, and this is the most basic feeling one needs in order to enjoy their interactions with you. The key in making someone feel comfortable and positive around you is to make yourself feel comfortable and positive. In order to be comfortable, you must address social anxiety. You do this by overcoming the fear of rejection, identifying and challenging beliefs, addressing insecurities, and focusing on the interaction. In order to feel positive, you must learn to respect yourself. You do this by being personally congruent, setting and enforcing strong boundaries, and feeling your feelings freely. Working with a therapist can help you work through any issues you have in this chapter or with life in general.